Hello everybody, I wanted to talk a little bit about Photoshop's Inpainting that just came out a few days ago, and before we get into it, one thing I wanted to say is that I find this technology extremely useful, and I'm going to demonstrate a lot of that here in a minute. But what a lot of you may know, especially some of you that are already experienced in the AI space, is that we've actually had this technology for quite a while now, probably the better part of 3 or 4 months. DALL-E has been able to do inpainting for quite some time. Stable Diffusion has been able to do image-to-image generation for quite a while as well, which is what you've seen in the AI-generated music videos. I believe Ariana Grande just had one, or was it Charlie XCX or something like that. That was using image-to-image, which is a similar process that we're using here. It's kind of a little bit of both. I imagine. So we are going to be looking at inpainting specifically in the lens of 3D product animation, 3D animation in general, and post-processing behavior and post-processing tools. Those of you who are familiar with the AI space understand that this type of technology, or inpainting specifically, is a frame-specific type of process, right? So this is one particular frame, or what we call a still frame, within a larger video. So the issue that we have right now is the fact that we need a way to find the technology I'm about to demonstrate to you demonstrated over every single frame within a video consistently and accurately, which is going to be a little bit of a process, as you'll see, but let's just get into it. Okay. First and foremost, there are many different ways you can do this. Sometimes when you have an image or you're working on a particular file, you're going to have multiple different layers, especially like artworks that are digitally comprised, digitally made. They are typically made using layers. So someone draws on one layer, then adds another one and continues to draw, and they begin overlapping basically without having to erase everything and put it all together at the same time. Here we have a full image, so think about it as if someone who made a digital painting took all those layers and smashed them into one, like you would drawing on a piece of paper. Basically, it's one sheet. So none of these assets are separate, they're all one image, which typically would be kind of challenging to edit. And the reason for that is because I made this image way back when. This was probably towards the beginning of my 3D animation career, my 3D product advertisement career. This was my application to Fiverr as a proof of concept and as a proof of, skill, basically. And honestly, they probably shouldn't have accepted me because this depth of field is atrocious. So what we're gonna do is we want to change, say, the bottom of this, the countertop basically, which obviously is super grainy. It'd be pretty tough to pull this out or delete it and then add something new and make it match. But with inpainting, it's not at all actually. So what we're going to do is, once you're in Photoshop beta, or this right here, once you're in Photoshop beta, you can go ahead and open your image, whatever you want to work on, and all you have to do is click on the lasso tool and just select what you want to change. So we want to change basically from the red part down. Now you don't have to have necessarily a perfect line cutting out everything that you don't want, but you do want it to be as much as possible. So for example, like over here, we wouldn't want to include any of the red if we can help it. We also don't want to cut off too much of this burger so that it can recognize that there's a shadow there and that it's actually sitting on something. Those are all, important things that you need to understand, because this is ultimately a computer looking at an image. So it only sees what it can see in the pixels, and if it can't see something in the pixels, for example here, where it's just super blurry and grainy, it has to do its best to guess, and you have to give it the best information possible for it to determine what it's looking at. It can look at the rest of the image. So for example, if we select here, it's not just looking at this portion, it's looking at the entirety of the image and what else is in it. So it can recognize the fact that we're looking at a picture of a burger right now. So when I select this, the hope is that it understands that we're sitting on a table, which it should. Because what we can do now is we can go ahead and say we want to change this to a different type of material. Let's do a white marble countertop. And we'll see what that gives us. Okay, so as you can see, we got a couple different results here, all of which are not bad at all, actually. These are surprisingly good. wow, what I find extremely interesting here when we're looking at this image is the fact that, going back to our conversation about depth of field and how difficult it would be for a computer to read something like this, or how difficult it would be for us to adjust something like this manually, it nailed the depth of field here. As we can see, it figured it out that in the back it has the depth of field, it knows where the area distance is, the focus distance, and it knows that there is some depth of field right up here. And even better than that, it took the liberty of going a step further and actually making a full tray for this, which I find extremely interesting. If we're looking at this from a 3D product visualization perspective, or from a 3D design perspective, you guys can definitely see the value that something like this has when the computer can actually take the creative liberty to come up with new ideas or to alter on an existing idea in the image. For example, it didn't just remove the ground, but it actually adjusted the wood. It complemented the wood with the marble ground, even though I didn't ask it to do that, which is particularly interesting in my opinion. So even though we wanted just a marble floor, we ended up getting a little bit extra. But maybe you don't like this, and that's okay. You can just literally just reset and Control Z, and then select maybe a little bit higher and try again, so that it doesn't even see any of this wood and all you get is the red in the burger, so that it completely fills it with marble. But overall, this is a fantastic result. You can even see over here we've got some red tinting happening where the burger isn't, so it recognized the fact that there would be a shadow from the burger. You can see some right here. There's a little bit of this yellow reflection here from the cheese, which is extremely interesting. So the amount of detail that this thing is able to get with just a simple 20-second, select and text is extremely valuable. Because from a 3D product perspective, when we think about the type of effort that it would take to create these 3 images here, maybe it's not terribly long. It may only be a couple of hours depending on the hardware you're working on, if even that, and depending on your skill level as well. But this is just so much more valuable. The fact that you can do this in 20 seconds and get these fantastic results, like, in all honesty, even now, 2.5 years later from when I originally made this image, I wouldn't be able to match this level of detail within the wood and the wood texturing and the reflections. Like, it did a better job with the lighting reflections than I could have done as an experienced animator. And what I also find really interesting is, look at where the marble countertop level is, right? So here we're kind of higher up, closer to the light, and here we're further down. You can see that there's less reflection happening. It's getting caught by the shadows of the tray. So these are all extremely interesting and extremely critical factors that we need to consider when using this technology. The fact that it can do something like this is something that you need to keep in the back of your mind as an animator or as a still image artist going forward, so that you can understand what your tool set is and how to get images done more efficiently, quicker, but not sacrificing quality at the same time. So let's say that, this is great and all, and this is definitely a good start, but let's say we wanted to give it just a little bit more action, right? What we could do is we could select this area, like the marble top, like all the way over here, all the way around, okay? And let's say we wanted to just add some fries, right? Let's say we did crispy fries. So as you can see, we got a little bit of a different result, and that's partially on my end because I typed fires instead of fries. But even then, we still get a pretty good result, right? And what's important to note here is the fact that this is also a layering system. So when you generate something, it adds it as a layer. So you can just completely remove it. You can adapt to it. So for example, let's say we didn't like this one down here, the marble floor. We can just straight up delete it and try again. So there's a lot that you can do with this. For example, even when we're looking at the fires, typically you would overlay something like this. You'd probably adjust the saturation values to make it match the rest of the scene, which I'm not going to do here because that takes more effort than it's worth, and that's not really the point of this video. But as we can see, it actually generated some pretty pretty decent fires, actually. I mean, for the scene. It just doesn't match necessarily what we're going for. But let's change this to fries, like it was supposed to be. Okay, and here we go. So we got some pretty good results here. Let's zoom a little bit closer so we can see what we're looking at. We had a little bit of trouble down here. Something went wrong, it looks like. Maybe with the depth of field, because like I said, it can be a little bit challenging. As you can see, it got the depth of field here, and it, when the depth of field decreased as it got closer to the focus distance over here, which is extremely interesting. And this is just image 1 of 6, right? So even as we're looking at this, like, this is pretty good. This isn't bad. But we have plenty more generations that we can look at. Here's more. Oh, these are our fires. So I guess it only produced 3, but still, so we can pick out of these 3, for example. I really like this one personally. I like this little distortion here, even though it's a distortion in the AI generation. It kind of looks like a lens flare, and to the untrained eye, that's what you're gonna see. So I like this one the most. It just seems to get the crispiness very, very well. So we can leave it like that, right? So now, this is what we have with really just AI generation. There was no 3D modeling here. Like, getting a 3D model, for example, of food like this is unbelievably challenging. Like, you would have to photo scan something like this, which takes a lot of time in and of itself. You'd have to go find the specific fry that you're looking for. You'd have to photo scan those fries in the proper lighting conditions. You'd have to bring in those models, clean up those models, position those models in the frame, then render it, and only then are you done. Here, all we had to do was highlight the floor where we wanted the fries, type crispy fries, hit enter, and we were done. So again, I don't need to explain the practicality of this from a 3D animation perspective for those of you that are in a similar industry, but I did want to highlight the fact that once this is able to be applied image to image, frame to frame in a specific series of videos, or specific series of frames, which then make up a whole video, we have a huge arsenal of post-processing effects that open a ton more doors for us in terms of creativity, from an artistic perspective, in terms of realism, from a product visualization perspective. There's just so much that this technology can do, and the power of it is unbelievable. I mean, it's unprecedented. There is no other time in history where we've been able to do anything like this. And this is just the brink of it, right? So what I've shown is just the meat of it, and I'll show some other generations on my Instagram page that you can go see the process behind those and how those images were made and the comparison between the before and after, as well as some footage here as to how those images turned out. But there's a lot more that you can do with this. You can add images from Google on top, select them, and then just hit generate, and it will add them to the frame, or we'll try to blend them as much as possible with the existing shot. So for example, if we wanted to add like a lizard or something in the bottom right corner, we could do that realistically, and we wouldn't need a full 3D model for it either. So again, as easy and capable as this technology is, it's important to realize that there's still artistic value in being able to do it yourself, and there's still marketing value and business value in doing it yourself as a creator and as a designer. Ultimately, you were hired to make the work, not the computer. So it's still important to do what you can and what physically makes sense and what makes sense within your time limit and your price range, but still, it's important to recognize this as an accurate and relevant alternative to, say, making the trays and modeling the fries, right, which would take hours versus 60 seconds total. Another thing that I wanted to note is the importance of this technology in Photoshop, right? So even though we've had this technology for such a long time, months now, and we've been able to do a lot with it, like I mentioned, music videos and just some other AI generated videos, the fact that it's in Photoshop is a huge deal. Photoshop in and of itself, being part of the Adobe line, is a critical part in most graphic design processes and pipelines. Most graphic designers or 3D animators, or really anyone who's using a computer for any type of design work, is using Photoshop at some point for something. Whether it's just making your background image transparent, or masking or layering, or making designs, or actually making art in Photoshop. everyone is using it. Photoshop is the standard for image editing. So the fact that we have now integrated this technology into an existing pipeline is incredible, because everything Photoshop and Adobe does is going to be to support their position as the #1 photo editing tool and the #1 editing tools in general. They want to maintain that position. They want to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, and especially with everyone being on the starting line now as AI has been introduced, they want to make sure that nobody can burn ahead of them, as DALL-E and as Runway has tried to do. Basically, there have been so many other pipelines that are starting to get created because of AI that these big tech and Adobe, they're starting to get scared because they don't want to lose that position, right? So the fact that it's in Photoshop is huge, because we already have pipelines for it, and it's only going to get better from here. It's only going to get easier to use from here, and it's only going to help us work faster, quicker, and more efficiently without losing quality from here. So those are just a few things that I wanted to mention, because this technology is completely unbelievable. And yeah, I would love to see what you guys make with it. If you guys end up, making anything in terms of art or in terms of product visualization, I would love to see it. Feel free to tag me on Instagram if you guys are posting it there, or tag me on YouTube. It'd be great to see what you guys are making. I love seeing the community, and not necessarily my community, but the AI generation community in general, and seeing what other people are making. So if there's anybody that would like to connect based on what I've said here today, feel free to reach out to me. I have all my stuff in the description, all my links, all my social media. So by all means, you can find me anywhere. So thank you guys, and I will talk to you guys soon.